It truly is an expansive topic as malnutrition, hunger, and the food security nexus sits at the confluence of a variety of different sectors which intersect with day-to-day lives of Pakistanis or anyone, any citizen, um, pretty frequently. Um, I'd like to start this conversation by reframing the notion of malnutrition as not just undernutrition, but also as inappropriate nutrition and in certain cases overnutrition as well. And what I mean by that is that I think most folks have a understanding of malnutrition or malnourishment as the idea that you are not getting enough calories to be able to sustain yourself on a daily basis. The truth of the matter is that that might not always be the case. Depending on whether you are talking about the urban markets in Pakistan or the rural market in Pakistan, you might be getting enough calories, but they might not be nutrient rich, nutrient dense calories. Um, this ends up creating a secondary problem, which is quite prevalent in Pakistan, which is something called hidden hunger. And hidden hunger refers to a malnutrition of a micronutrient deficiency. So these micronutrient deficiencies of iron, vitamin A, vitamin B, and a host of other so-called micronutrients end up causing a huge slew and plethora of health issues amongst children who grow up to be undernourished and maladied adults. Um, then the other reality that exists in parallel to that of hidden hunger and undernourishment is that of overnourishment. Pakistanis genetically also are prone, from a health perspective, to having a higher visceral adipose tissue, to being more genetically prone, about 7 times more than their sub-Saharan African counterpart, even, of diabetes, of having much more chronic heart disease and other essentially obesity-related illnesses because of either a sedentary lifestyle, depending on your economic bracket, and paired that with a diet that is poor in dietary diversity. So, when we look at malnutrition, we need to take it sort of um, all in tow, and we have to look at the entire picture. And these different realities are existing sort of in parallel to each other throughout the country. Um, so, the issues of the primary issues of hunger in Pakistan, it's not necessary that you would think that it is a result of underproduction of food in the country. When we
So,
look at food, yeah, sorry, go
so,
ahead.
so just to clarify, hunger and malnutrition can be two different things. There are
Very much.
nuances that exist between them. So you may be consuming the right amount of calories, but you may not be consuming the nutrients that are needed for a healthy functioning body to grow
Exactly.
or to sustain itself. Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's it exactly. Yeah. That differentiation is quite important, and I think one that a lot of Pakistanis end up suffering at the hands of. So, again, moving the conversation of food security or food insecurity away from just a availability of food. Food security ends up sitting again on the nexus of four major concepts. The first being the availability of food, which is what I think most people have a general sense of when they refer to hunger or when they refer to malnutrition or when they think of Pakistan as a country where a lot of folks suffer from acute food insecurity. The second being that of food availability, which is when the food is second that of being food accessibility, which is then if the food is available, the food is being produced, is it accessible? Is there farm to market access in there? Are there markets where people can go and walk up and essentially procure whatever they need, raw ingredients, poultry, vegetables, fruit, in order to have a healthy diet? And infrastructure plays a big role in that, as well as education. So you have availability, you have accessibility, third becomes affordability. Now that you have these markets that are created throughout the country, can people afford? Does their purchasing power allow them to be able to buy the key ingredients that would allow them and to feed themselves uh, holistically and also their children? And then the fourth is a notion of sustainability. which is a lot where our agricultural practices come into play as well. Are we farming in line with what the topographical and geographical landscape of the country looks like? Pakistan is a water scarce country. It passed water stressed, I believe, in 1997. And ever since then, we have drawn down on our freshwater reserves and have started pulling a lot, as you know, in a lot of urban markets, from our groundwater table. That groundwater table is very hard to replenish, and in the absence of consistent yet managed rains, it becomes quite hard to, again, replenish the groundwater table. It ends up in a fair amount of groundwater runoff. So the idea of is our agricultural production aligned with our water availability? Is it aligned with the nutrient health of our soil? Is it aligned with the essentially with the structure of the average farm in Pakistan? These four sort of considerations end up forming what you and I refer to as food security in Pakistan. So the before we even get into solutions, I think it's quite important to paint a more vivid picture of what food insecurity in Pakistan really is. I refer to
Absolutely.
hidden hunger, which is malnutrition at a micronutrient level. Now, one way for us to resolve that is food fortification of our staple crops. We know, I mean, unfortunately, last year being an exception with the floods coming, and a tremendous amount, a majority of our agricultural sort of crop being damaged or compromised in some way. Other than that, the food production of Pakistan has been relatively stable. But what happens at that point is we have to start accounting for pilferage and waste. In countries like Pakistan, agrarian economies in Pakistan, underdeveloped or developing, countries like Pakistan, a majority of the food waste that is happening is not happening at the retail or consumer level. It is happening at the farm level, and that issue manifests itself in a lack of infrastructure for farmers to be able to sustainably store their crop and their harvest. In the absence of silos, farmers end up storing their crops in non-temperature or humidity controlled warehouses if they have access to it all in all. And that is a breeding ground for aflatoxin and lots of other types of uh, pests and micropests in particular crops, makai and wheat as the two most prominent examples. Um, and that ends up contributing a fair amount to the waste. And if any food shortages is created in Pakistan, that waste it ends up forming a pretty large part of that conversation there. So in the absence of that infrastructure, a small or micro or medium-sized farmer who does not have access to proper and appropriate storage solutions will try to offload their product as soon as possible, essentially as soon as it is harvested. This results in a vicious cycle of poverty and debt-riddenness, at least at the farm level, which is the farmer who has taken loans in order to be able to secure the agri inputs required for him to plant in the first place, then has to repay those loans with interest